TIL Navajo Code Talkers were commended for the skill, speed, and accuracy they demonstrated throughout World War II. One officer said, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." They were also assigned bodyguards to protect them from fellow Americans, or kill them if captured. This post talks about Navajo Code Talkers yet uses a picture of Choctaw Code Talkers from WWII. Nothing against the Navajo, but the Choctaw don't get a whole lot of recognition. My great-great-grandfather fought in World War I, came home and settled down and lived a simple life. My dad remembers him and said he loved to listen to his stories, but he never talked about the war, except to acknowledge that he had fought. Imagine my family's surprise when years after his death, we found out he had been one of the original Choctaw Code Talkers. He's not in the picture above and there is only one known photograph of him. One of the higher-ups overheard a group of Choctaw talking and realized if he couldn't understand them, the Germans couldn't either. We don't know if he was the sender or the receiver, but he participated in the first radio conversation. He and his fellow Choctaws were posthumously awarded a special gold medal. The gold one is with the oldest of the family and there were several non-good medals given out to some others. My dad's sister is president of the Choctaw Code Talkers Association and gave a medal to my dad. He gave it to me last year. The fact that sticks with me is my grandfather wasn't allowed to be a citizen when he served. He did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. Growing up in New Mexico, we got to learn a lot about these guys. One of them even came to talk to our high school. He said that the last bit about the bodyguard was true. He showed us a picture of him from the war and I could see how he could be mistaken for Japanese, or at least Asian. That was a really cool day. Unfortunately, he passed away a few months later. Among the first Navajo Code Talker recruits was Chester Nez. As a child growing up in Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding schools, Nez had his original Navajo name replaced with Chester, after President Chester A. Arthur. He was forbidden from speaking his native tongue. Students who did so were beaten or had their mouths washed out with soap. So, it's a frightening irony that after America's cultural genocide on American Indians that their culture helped win the war. All those years, telling you not to speak Navajo, and then to turn around and ask us for help with that same language. It still kind of bothers me. Chester Nez. To be clear, Nez was proud of his service, but there is also important historical context which makes these people in American history more complex and worth acknowledging. We should honor their service, and remember America's past too. I've watched Wind Talkers too much. I'm afraid it's been 9 years. Any good book recommendations on the Navajo Code Talkers? Would like to learn more. This kid I went to middle school with had a grandfather who was a code talker and he brought in an action figure that had his granddad's voice on it. Whenever code talkers come up, I always like to mention that there were more than just Navajo. Many American Indian tribes had code talkers. Menominee, Cherokee, Meskwaki, and many others, some of whose languages are nearly gone. You can help preserve dying languages by donating to projects like the Menominee Language and Culture Commies Zion, https://www. Menominee.nsn. gov/government pages/department. ASPX, department ID = 1. I am Choctaw. There were Choctaw Code Talkers even before Navajos. It's a part of my culture and history we're quite proud of. In the WWII Burma campaign, the British often used Welsh-speaking soldiers to send and receive radio messages, figuring there weren't many Welsh Japanese knocking about the jungle. Source: My Dad, Royal Welsh Fusiliers, Burma. Excerpt from Navajo Weapon, The Navajo Code Talkers, by Sally McLean. Hunt told us he was going to make us compete with a code machine using the same message to see who they were going to keep and use, the machine or the Navajos. I asked him how long it took for a coded message to go out to a unit, decipher it and receive a reply. Hunt replied, about 4 hours. How long will it take you to send the same message? About 2 minutes, I said. Are you going to send, decipher, and bring a message back telling me it's delivered, give it to a coding officer, have him sign it, and bring it back in 2 minutes. Hunt yelled. Yes sir, I replied. Hunt just laughed and said, oh yeah. Bullshit. This coding machine will outdo any coding machine there is. To prove it, McCabe continued, Hunt initiated the message and asked when we were going to start. I replied that I wanted to give them a running start because we could get it done in 2 minutes. I picked up the field telephone and sent the message. Hunt was standing there timing me with his watch when I got the Roger. 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Hunt said. You must have already read this message somewhere. McCabe replied, you wrote it just now. I can't explain that, we are just a walking code machine. Whatever we send in Navajo comes out properly decoded on the receiving end. That was the end of the test. Every message that had urgent or secret status we sent. The code talkers made a believer out of LT. Hunt. The words of PFC William McCabe on his initial experience landing on Guadalcanal. Thanks for winning us Iwo Jima, now back to your impoverished reservation, champ. If you ever make it to Kayenta, Arizona, there is a great mini museum to the code talkers in Burger King. Get a soda, check it out, and then go to the Blue Coffee Pot for your food and put more money into the local economy. Please include the Tlingit code talkers from Alaska, the actual code that was given. https://u2b/miknaqttci, amazing. I couldn't begin to comprehend how this translates to send demolition team to. https://www. Native Village, org/inspiration-list %20 of %20 names %20 of %20 Navajo %20 code talkers. HTM. According to the first source cited by the Wikipedia article, the notion that the bodyguards were also supposed to kill the code talkers if captured is based on a rumor that circulated among the code talkers. The Marines have always denied they would ever give orders for one Marine to kill another. But the story has circulated among the code talkers for years. Chester Nez heard it from a code talker who heard it from his bodyguard. Source, https://www. CBS News. com/news/the code talkers 29-05-2002/. There is one instance of the Japanese capturing a Navajo-speaking soldier and torturing him in order to translate the language. However, because he was not a code talker, he could only translate the words and did not help the Japanese to break the code. During the 3.5 years that the code was in use in the Pacific, the code was never broken. There was one known instance of a native Navajo being forced to decipher the code. SGT, Jokai Iomia was a Navajo in the U.S. Army in the Philippine Islands at the beginning of World War II and was captured after the fall of Corregidor in 1942. During his 43 months in Japanese prisoner of war camps, he was tortured to decipher intercepted Navajo messages. One day 2 Japanese women visited me, he says. They wrote Navajo words in English and asked what they meant. So, I told them, this means bird, this means turtle, this means water. What prevented the Japanese from breaking the Navajo code was the second level of encryption that was used. Since Kai Iomia was not trained to be a code talker, he was unable to make any relationship between the code words and military terms. While the Navajo code talkers were communicating in their own language, then didn't just say tanks are coming up the road, they codified the phrases. Instead of calling a tank, it was called tortoise, a rocket was called a sand boil, a flare was called a light streak, and comma was called a tail drop. Souse, http://www. Math. UCSD. edu/crypto/projects/Mitch-Elmay/Navajo %20 code %20 site/procon. HTML. Yet today many Navajo are living without running water. They fetch every drop of water for themselves from a stream. IMHO, it's a failure of our country. The so-called American dream isn't seen by most of America's origins tribes. SMH.